to be radically generous, radically courageous, radically just. Then apply those to our temperature, apply those to our spending, apply those to all these areas.
Pete started talking about it.
We haven't talked about retirement at all either.
Yeah, retirement. Oh my gosh.
It's all connected.
How are we going to get there? What's our time frame?
You know,
Pete, you're just crazy. I've often felt that way. And found I was. It's true.
Like a few minutes ago.
So it's a good lesson that eventually it
But
turns out.
I would have saved enough money to survive, 3 bouts of cancer.
What? I thought you were being serious about you.
No.
This episode of The Men's Show was sponsored by Select International Tours. Awesome partners of ours. We really appreciate their support for this show. You can check them out at selectinternationaltours.com. Hey, stay frosty, extraordinary ladies and gentlemen. Back to the show. Once again, if you'd like to be part of future live streams, bonus content, and support the show and make sure that we're able to have, some green label on the table in front of us next time, please join the Men's Show patron community over at themenshow.com. Right? I have that right. It's called the League of Ordinary Gentlemen, and ladies are invited too. And you can access that via the Awaken app.
Okay, so one of the things we've talked about in recent months, we had some guys up to give talks around the subjects of money, good money. How do we use our money? They're from New Polity. Check them out.
Yes.
But one of the things we talked about was, I'll bring in kind of twofold things. Retirement. Is it good for men to retire? Men, anybody to retire? If so, what do we mean by that? Or saving for retirement? What does that mean? And then a tie in with how should Catholics invest? How shouldn't they invest? A lot of questions.
It's a good topic.
Well, first of all, I think as far as investing, that most Catholics are probably investing in companies that are doing terrible, awful things, like including giving billions of dollars to abortion
You're really
facilities.
jumping into it.
So, well, it's one of the things that I've become, so I invest, but I directed the gentleman who's a good guy. I said, I don't want to invest in any companies that are doing bad practices that go against my Catholic faith. So if they're donating Microsoft was one for me because Bill Gates and the amount of money he gives to population control and abortion and stuff, it's like, I don't want my money going there. So I don't invest there. I don't invest in China because any company in China, we're not investing there because it's the one child policy. And I don't think this is even a question, or even Catholics even know that they're investing in companies that end up, supporting these types of things. So
I would agree. And I'm just going to take a stroll down memory lane. We've had this conversation before, but the question was, should a Catholic have a savings account?
And where did we have that conversation?
We had this conversation at Trotters in Bowling
That's right,
Green.
baby.
And I will quote the younger Pete Range at the time. He's changed a little bit here. He said, I don't think a Catholic should have a savings account. Now, he wasn't terribly tied to that statement at the time. He was pondering. And you mentioned storehouses, like the gospel of storing up goods in heaven. And I'm like, at that time, I was like, Pete, you're crazy. You're just crazy. I've often felt that way. And found I was. It's true.
Like a few minutes ago.
So it's a good lesson that eventually it turns out.
Over the years, I certainly wouldn't say it as simply as oh, your bank is labeled a savings account and you have money in it, But over the years, I've completely changed how I feel. Probably a lot in the last year, I've changed how I feel about how we should save our money, shouldn't save our money, which is it's just a crazy proposition.
Yeah. I remember agreeing with Pete at the time, and now I feel all the more so strongly along those lines.
And elaborate that, because obviously we're speaking out of
also
we have around here, but that sounds crazy. So elaborate. It does. Yeah.
So Nick Meyer, by the way, asked if we're reading comments, and we are indeed, sir. So you can join us for this festivity.
Nick, I love you, man.
So, okay, why do I feel that? Because we largely this has been.
Well, and can define your terms too,
sure.
That Christians shouldn't have a savings account, at all, Or like what kind of savings? Like what are you talking about?
Okay,
What are you defending before you defend it?
Thank you for pushing me to do so. So for me, as a non-economist, I actually somehow managed to graduate without taking economics, even though it was one of the requirements. Like I'm not a guy. For me, my relationship with numbers is I can count to 4 because I'm a musician. Okay, so I am very humble about what I don't know when it comes to economics, and I lean into my friendships and people that I trust heavily for that stuff. But from a spiritual standpoint, and this has been hardened for me or strengthened in me ever since I got into New Polity as a result of you, John Mark, and you, Rob, where they talk about how our money should have a specific end in mind and not just be this like ominous or ambiguous reservoir in case something bad happens, that it's there to take care of us, which almost presupposes or implies that we are in charge of taking care of us rather than God. So we got to make sure that we've created a cushion that we can fall on because we can't trust that we're going to fall on God. And so we spend our lives a lot of times building up these savings accounts, building up wealth, and it's just kind of this. There isn't a finite like here's what I'm aiming at for this dollar that I'm putting away. So I am investing right now, but I'm investing with specific ends in mind, and I'm not just going to do this for my whole life.
Yeah, and so again, kind of like with our last discussion, we have an issue here where we can think of the extremes, and we can recognize both the extremes are wrong here. It's not right for the Christian to abdicate any reason or prudential judgment. Like,
right.
Yeah, if you have a family, you got to take care of your family. So we're not saying
Don't squander your money.
We're not saying
right.
you just be a prodigal. You don't think. You just do whatever you feel like. Certainly, that's one extreme. But the other extreme is the person who is maybe in subtle ways, but perhaps growing ways as they become habituated to it. They're trying to use the money and financial systems to create something other than God that they place their trust and their hope in.
Yeah, bingo.
And so
Security.
somewhere in the middle, there is a right amount of money. There's a right amount of there's saving for things that you actually need, that you're actually called to. But somewhere beyond that, there's saving money just to have money, to make sure that I have power, that I have security, that I can deal with any situation. And so like trying to find what's that prudent place in the middle where the money that you have is spent well, it's saved for the actual things God's calling you, and money beyond that, to set it aside, to put it up in a barn, so to speak, could be problematic.
Yeah.
So here's how I would say it. I think what we like to do is gather more and more undesignated money, money for whatever, just in case money. When we get more money, I feel like certainly we have an amount that we, in our modern society that comes in every month, goes out every month. But when you have money that's beyond what you normally need to live your life, I think a lot of people put it in unspecified savings for nothing specific.
Yeah.
Indefinitely.
Yeah.
But once they have, I think it's important to spend the money, even if it's only in your mind, and spending that money should involve the process of saying, God, what is this money for? Mm-hmm. Why did I get this money? Using your money, for good purposes, and not just indefinitely for tomorrow.
But I think that's what you just said is really the key to the matter. Like, God might call you to have a savings account, and having a savings account quite large, in fact, because maybe he has a purpose for the money that you don't know. But in prayer, you've gone to God and you said, God, what do you want me to do with this? And in obedience, in that prayer, you should do what God is asking you to do, whether that's to give all your money away or whether that's to save some or save a whole heck of a lot, because God, again, I think, so my view from Trotters originally, it stands in the sense that I feel like every Christian is called to a baseline of radical living when it comes to living a life that is totally disattached of the things of this world. But having worked now with individuals who have lived in poverty a lot, and then working with a lot of individuals who have money who help those types of individuals in tremendous ways. And there's a nice give and take because they both help each other. I've seen the great good that good, prudent decisions can make if you do save your money, and how you can advance the kingdom of God through the gifts of financial wealth. So it comes back to like, God, what do you want me to do? And if you want me to have a savings account, then blessed be God, I'll have a big savings account.
And that makes total sense to me, because again, still you've gone through that process.
Right.
You set aside the money for the purpose that, again, I think that maybe the thing that we mustn't do is to put off that discernment. Like, I'm setting aside this money, and yeah, maybe I'll do good with it, but also maybe I'll just spend it on a boat someday. Like, that's not what we should be doing. If we are saving prayerfully, prudently, it's because we really have promised God that we're going to be attentive to the Spirit and do something great and good with this, and not just turn around when we kind of get bored and spend it on ourselves.
I tell you what's changed my heart in this too a little bit, or how I appreciate the attention more, is having kids and like wanting to see the best for my kids taken care of, and setting them up so that they're in a position that, not that I want to pay for everything for their life or even like pay for their entire, like I want them to learn the value and hard work and things of that nature. But like, you know, like how much, you know, if you could potentially lose a job or you potentially get hurt, I mean, is there any amount of money that we should be like putting in a savings account just for something that we don't know could happen? Like, is there any room for that there for you guys, or what do you think?
I think
Not for me.
I mean, there's certainly
Nothing.
like,
no.
Put zero in the bank.
Specifically in that ambiguous, like, I don't know what's going to happen.
An emergency
yeah.
fund?
No, I don't agree explicitly. I mean, it depends on, like, if you're thinking about, hey, my washer and dryer could go out. So this is roughly an amount that, like, if that were to go out, this, you know, some utility or appliance in my house could go out. Here's an amount that could pay for that. And so I'm going to hold that.
or my car could die.
Or my car could, yeah.
So you are on board with that or not?
Yeah, I am on board with that. But that isn't the same as just this ambiguously amassing, you know, vault of money, you know, like the McDuck, Scrooge McDuck, whatever. Yeah.
I would have saved enough money to survive, you know, 3 bouts of cancer. Good luck. You know what I mean? Like this is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like we can.
I thought you were being
save
serious
for
about
these.
you.
No. But like we could save for like massive disaster, and I mean most of the time they're going to wipe out all of our funds anyway.
So there's a big difference between that scenario that was just put out there a second ago, like, you know, what if I get fired or whatever? Like, I don't think that we should live our lives assuming we might get fired necessarily. But in contrast, if you're planning on leaving the position you're in and starting some type of entrepreneurial situation or whatever, then in a very intentional way, you give yourself a 6-month runway or maybe a 12-month runway.
But you've saved to provide for yourself for the next 6 to 12 months.
Right.
And it is a definite amount too.
Exactly.
It's not like I'm going to save, you know, I'll save $20,000. It's not like I'm going to save as much as I can for the next 6 months.
Yeah. If we're in a situation where, oh, frick, I might get fired, I should be ready for that. Like, you should probably not be in that situation, you know? Like,
Well, not everybody can control that. I mean, because there might be vaccine mandates that, you know, could come down. It's
for
like,
sure. And we're in a weird world right now. I don't know how this applies to that, but I do want, we before we get further here, we have a few questions that we should get to from the comments, but did we mention in this episode our shiny new patron community?
The shiny new patron community is called the League of Ordinary Gentlemen, and ladies are invited too, over at themenshow.com. Get exclusive benefits, bonus content. Eventually, we're probably going to move this live stream over there. So if you want to continue to join us for this monthly virtual men's night, gotta head over there.
Yeah, so we started this party at 6:30.
Or maybe
tonight.
we won't. Like, I mean,
We'll see what happens.
Changes every 5 minutes.
we'll see what happens.
Can you go back to just John, Mark, and I on the couch calling just for a second?
Oh my gosh. Why are we doing this?
Because I look like half the man he is with all the hair.
You are. I mean, like, it's been a long COVID winter.
Is that like a super nice charitable way of saying you're fat?
No, it has nothing to do with weight, just the ability
Listen,
to grow.
I'd be happy to donate
the
some
beard.
of this and some of this.
Oh, you meant the manliness. Half
the
the
manliness. Yes. I
Okay,
feel
okay.
very intimidating.
Well,
Cool. Glad we had this conversation.
Hey, you made it this far. It's time to refresh that drink and grab another cigar. But hey, while we're doing that, please check out selectinternationaltours.com, our sponsor for this episode of The Men's Show. They're great partners of the show. We appreciate their support. We'll see you when you get back.
Close up on this little puppy dog.
Yes.
For just $5 a month, you could get John Mark one drink.
Just one. That's all I require.
All right. So first question here from Nick Meyer. He sent this question a little bit ago when I was answering your question, John Mark, from me. But his question is, what are the ends that you have in mind that a Christian should have in mind? In terms of like reasons to invest or put money away or whatever. So we kind of touched on that a second ago.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't talk about investment at all.
Right.
Really. Pete started talking about it.
We haven't talked about retirement at all either.
Retirement. Oh my gosh.
It's all connected.
How are we going to get there? What's
Continue
our
what you're
time
saying.
frame?
We'll get there somehow.
Well, what are the ends? What are we saving money for?
I think one's got to be to help the poor, like the universal destination of goods. We have private properties just so that we can be generous. Like that's the purpose that we.
It's also to contrast that it's important not that we just save up our money so that maybe we can have vague aspirations of helping the poor someday. You know what I mean? It's not good to be miserly now so that we can be generous later.
Right,
so that obligation to be good to the poor is upon us at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need to fulfill that duty, and it may involve saving as well.
Yeah. I think those obligations, those are matters of justice. This is talking about the virtue of justice here. Justice isn't optional, and it's not something you necessarily have to go out there and find. Like already right now, by virtue of your vocation as a son or daughter of God, your vocation as a husband and father, your vocation as a member of the church, your vocation as a employee of your company or whatever, you already have a series of obligations and duties with respect to those positions. And so the money that you should be pursuing should be the money that allows you to carry out those roles well. So yeah, I mean, as a Christian, you are to help the poor. Well, you should try to have money to help the poor. You should, keep your family housed and fed, and you should educate your children and all that. You should be trying to think concretely, though, and what do I actually need for that? Not just, I'll just save up a crap ton of money, and then, yes, I'll use it for these good things. Well, no, you should be thinking in terms of your duties and responsibilities, and then prayerfully trying to bring the money to those things.
Here's an issue, and I think it's a big one for a lot of families, is education, though. I mean, there's some high schools, $14,000 a year to go to Catholic high school. Like, is that a worthy cause?
Yeah, number one, is that even worth it?
Money.
I mean, how Catholic is it? Is it extra Catholic because it's extra expensive? I mean,
that's how it works.
So let's make the assumption, that this is a good Orthodox, faithful Catholic school that's really trying to raise saints. Like, is that a worthy endeavor to put down? I can't do 14 times 4 real quick in my head, but $60,000 or so. Is that a worthy cause to you guys? I mean,
I'm sure it depends on the person, the position, their own discernment with their own children.
I don't see any reason why it couldn't for a particular family who's discerned that.
Yeah,
that's not where my family's going.
Yeah, I can't say that about anyone else that it's the right or wrong decision. For me, I could never imagine myself investing that amount into something that might be just as good somewhere else or similar-esque.
We'll take it to the next level. I mean, Steubenville is a great college, and I would feel very comfortable sending my kids to Steubenville or Christendom or something of that nature. Not my alma maters. I don't want to talk about them right now, but I shouldn't say. I take it back. But like,
this is live. You have friends from that place. Sorry.
Oh, and it's so frustrating. If we just live by our Catholic values, folks, we could reform the world. But anyway, with that being said, I mean, how much is Steubenville? I'm guessing 20,000 a year.
Lot.
I mean, is it more?
30,000,
40,000? I mean, does that fall under the realm of prudence to say, hey, for my child to have the best chance he or she can have in this world, I want them to get a great Catholic education. I want them to be a saint. This is a great way. I want to have that door open for them to have that opportunity. I mean, is that reasonable, unreasonable to you?
It doesn't sound unreasonable.
No, it seems reasonable.
Sounds like a good idea.
But I think again, two different families could discern very differently on that.
Yeah. It doesn't like now everyone has to save $40,000 a year for 4 years for each of their children.
If there was a Catholic school, if there's a hypothetical, none of these exist, but if there was a hypothetical Catholic school that was doing a really crappy job of educating children, and they were all coming out atheists, and they were all coming out not believing the faith, well then here in our hypothetical scenario, we could probably say, yeah, I don't think families should be sending their kids there in that case. But in most of the cases we would bring up in the real world, of course. Don't look at me like that. I think it admits of a lot of potential discernment for different individuals, different families.
So here's a question on this and I haven't watched any of the New Polity podcast, so I'm.
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay, because this is something my family doesn't spend a lot of money on, though, like entertainment. What part does entertainment play in how much money and where we spend it?
Well, that goes into our leisure topic. That goes into.
Well, I mean,
Well,
We are never
you
going to talk
guys-
about retirement tonight.
I mean, these topics, like whether it's vaccines, right? It's going to involve personal choices that we make. We have to be willing to kind of go
Yeah.
there to say, yeah, I mean,
that's probably an important thing to offer up to God. I think as Americans, we like to bury our heads in the sands on that one sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, if every single dollar that we made is truly God's, which it is, you know.
He doesn't need it.
Well, he didn't
I'm
need the money.
kidding.
You know what I'm saying, though. But like the good that we can do and the potential that money has should be for God's purposes. If that entertainment fits in that, then
Well, and here's the thing: and this is involving this primary important virtue of prudence here. So if you sit down and you discern this and you say, okay, well, at this point, it seems like Netflix is a good investment for my family. We enjoy it. We do a lot with it. I'm going to decide to use some of my
objectively
money for
wrong.
it. I'm going to use some of my money for it. Well, here's the thing, though, Pete. If that person practices prudence in that decision, even if they're wrong, even if they're wrong, the point is they've opened themselves more to the Holy Spirit's prompting in the future because they're practicing being reasonable. They're practicing making an actual decision rather than just doing whatever they feel. And that person can be led by the Holy Spirit to decide down the road, you know what? I don't actually think Netflix is good for my family, so I'm going to get rid of it.
yeah.
And so
So becoming a saint is more important than being
they're
right.
habituating themselves to being reasonable, being decisive. Yeah.
Would you say that becoming a saint is more important than being right?
Let us know in the comments if
are
you're viewing.
those two things not?
Well, what do you mean by being right?
Being
Like-
right.
Feeling right?
I don't know.
Feeling like you're right? Getting the last word
It's
in?
hard- yeah.
Is that, I don't know how to.
I don't know. I like getting the last word in.
All right, so I think entertainment is just something to consider. We could pick it up maybe another time. But,
really,
I want to get to retirement too.
What you're
because
really
that's a
getting at is the question of budgeting, just in general, right?
Well, I mean, you're wrestling with, well, how much is too much?
Well, how much
Yeah.
is too much, and what category should even be in the budget if we're talking about like
Right. So, like, let's say you're super wealthy and you do make donations to your parish and to the diocese and even amazing organizations like AWAKEN Catholic or the Men's Show. And let's say you're not. And now you're like, oh, I should be. You should do that. Anyway, no, that's a digression. But like, let's say you are using your money for good, but you also have a lake house and you also have a boat and you all, like, is there a point at which we should like, no, the lake house is too much. No, the boat is too much. That could have also gone to the church. That could have also gone to the poor. Like, that's why to me, the budget is like a whole nother conversation.
you-
I'm not saying that's what I believe.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's where that takes you almost.
So we grew up in Sandusky. My own father has a boathouse and a boat. And like the blessing that it was for my family, and still is today, we all go out to the sandbar and like we do a lot of family things on the boat. You know, I would see that as a good and an enriching thing for our lives. I wouldn't take issue with it provided like there's discernment there.
Well, and again, whenever you're doing something like that, you're opening if you're being virtuous in that action, then you're opening yourself up to, if the Lord really wants to come in and say, okay, that's great. I want you to be even more generous in a way that's even different now. You're open to that. But it starts by even just where you are, you know, like being intentional about the things that you have, the activities you're doing.
Yeah,
But
you
is
also
there- is
can't
there
do
an-
it for other people. That's the other challenge. You want to go and look at everyone else's situation and say, well, you have too much.
Yeah, I mean, but if Bernie Sanders has 4 houses, or the leaders of Black Lives Matter have like 4 houses, it's like, all right, is that like, am I not allowed to like make a judgment and say, are you using your funds for
I think
the
that's actually
advancement of-
kind of a Christian obligation.
To have 4 houses?
No, but to call on
Challenge each
people
other, yeah.
who have more than they may need. I think it is. I think it's a duty and responsibility of a Christian to,
Right.
you know, say, hey, you're extra, you're excess.
right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that challenge is, I think, something we're all called to. The issue is that, like, again, any of us could go to any of our houses and presume to second guess each other's decisions on this.
Yeah.
So we should be challenging each other, but ultimately what we need to be challenging each other is like, I don't know exactly what more radical generosity looks like you in terms of the next steps, Rob, but you are to be radically generous. I think one of the recent podcasts, the guys on the New Polity said something I really liked, which is that prudence is not about whether you are to live out the gospel radically, it's about the how. I thought that was a great little pithy quote. Like, sometimes we read the gospel passage of the rich young ruler and we kind of read ourselves out of that passage because, well, certainly that can't apply to me
I'm not called to give everything away.
because I got a family. So therefore that passage doesn't apply to me. And the point is, well, no, yes, it does. You too are supposed to give it all to Jesus. But how that looks in your life, you actually have to discern with Jesus, which is going to look different from that rich young ruler. It's going to look different from Rob, from Nick.
Right.
You are to live radically, no doubt about it. Every dollar, every moment, every minute. But you have to discern that how in prayer.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's got to be some. What's that book? Happy Are You Poor? Have you guys?
Oh,
Dubay.
yeah.
I love that book.
Yeah, Thomas Dubay.
That book made me hurt.
Yeah, and I feel
That's
like
why I didn't read it.
I haven't read it for a while, but I feel like he talks about there are some like baselines for each vocation, though, and like each vocation was a little bit different. as
Well,
far as, like,
he was very
what we're called to.
concrete. I think you'd be very
I love
drawn
concrete.
to that because you were like, I want to know the line. I want to know. He quotes the temperature. You can have your temperature in your home between this and that. You know,
Are
it
you
was-
serious? I'm so glad I didn't read that book.
And it was very specific.
It's worth
in
it.
some
It's a good
ways,
I-
in some ways, those guides are helpful, but I mean, there's also limited. They're not like, you know, we can't go and say you can't go, you know, below 70 degrees in your house. You just can't. That's not
That's
right
just
because you're
too-
being wasteful
that's too
with your
soft.
cool weather.
Can we say that there's certain maybe ideals that we could shoot for, and maybe 70 degrees is an ideal that we shouldn't like?
But why
just-
is
But
that an
everyone
idea?
should shoot for the ideal of 70 degrees.
No, everyone
or
should shoot
John
for
Mark
the
runs
ideal of-
hot.
President Biden should make an announcement
Mandate.
that it's
More
mandated
mandates.
I'm not
that
trying.
if your house has 2 or more people in it.
I'm just trying to help us think. I'm not necessarily like dying on
No,
a
I know,
70
I know.
degree hill here, but like I've been to Port-au-Prince, Haiti twice, right? I mean, kids eat mud cakes. And so every donut that I buy when I go to Dunkin' Donuts or something, like I do like,
mud on it. No.
no, it's
Sorry.
no. Yeah. Well, it's not funny for me because I've seen kids,
Yeah.
you know, starving. I know you don't, but I do think about that when I'm like
Yeah.
enjoying a treat where I'm like, my God, there's kids dying literally in this moment of starvation because they don't have nutrients and stuff. So like, is there a baseline that we can say that, well, maybe we should talk about the temperature in our house, because for me to wear t-shirts and shorts in the wintertime, that's just about my comfort. It's not about, you know, that's not about really what I need to have so I can be comfortable in my home. We are so craven and so beholden to comfort in our society. I think that's a good challenge that we need a Thomas Debate to say, hey, look at your temperature. Look at some of these other things in your life. You just accept as, well, it's just whatever.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I just think it would be hard to get to a very specific degree for a very specific person.
But they wouldn't be applicable to everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
But there can be like people who need to discern that they're like using their temperature in their home, excess heats for their comfort solely. I don't know. Is that complicated?
Kevin wants to know, he says, God called me to be a drummer. How many drum sets am I allowed to own? And Nick Meyer says, what is entertainment? What might that have to do with leisure and rest? Many questions to be considered here.
Gosh. Okay.
Colleen is sighing. Are we boring you, Colleen?
Yeah. Well, and again, I always bring this back to virtue, and the virtues really are about training us to be the kind of people who can think this and pursue the ideals. And again, there's no objective temperature that is the ideal. Like obviously 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, the situation would have been completely different. But the ideal that we're called to be radically generous, radically courageous, radically just, radically all the virtues, the qualities, the beatitudes, those are our ideals. And so we have to try to live those out radically. But yeah, then apply those to our temperature, apply those to our spending, apply those to our free time, apply those to all these areas. And again, I think there's room for baby steps in the sense of, well, I'm going to plant my flag in the sand today, and I'm going to put it at this temperature. But that also means I'm open to next week, you know, Thomas Debate coming and smacking me over the head and saying, no, you need to challenge yourself a little bit more. Like we're open to that.
Yeah.
But it's the
temperatures
ideals
are funny.
And I think that the fraternal correction is so important. Like someone was saying, I think you were saying that, you know, you feel like there is a responsibility to call each other out. Like if we're being a little extra, you said something like that. And I totally agree with that. Like, I think that we have to lean, because we are so blind to our own bull crap most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the time we're not so blind to it, but we're just kind of pretending it's not there, or, you know.
Is that what you were doing?
And so And so we've come to that part in every show in which we announce that, Nick, this is really all a ruse. This is an intervention. We've been wanting to talk to you about.
In other news, not to change the topic,
Retirement still.
literally right now while we were talking about that,
Yes.
freaking Mike Tenney, Pop Culture Catechism, just brought in another $50 donor for his patron community. Guys, we need your help. We need to take down Pop Culture Catechism community. We got to beat them. Join
Ordinary League, the League of Ordinary Gentlemen, and ladies are invited too.
Yes.
At themenshow.com.
Themenshow.com. And
Wonderness.
you don't have to come in at $50, but if you could do it, super. We have multiple levels. So if you want to support the glory that is happening here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have exactly 5 minutes for this topic remaining, and then we're going to move on to the next topic. Okay. So
can I try to boil it down to a couple bullet points? I won't answer them. I'll just ask them. Okay, so what is retirement? And given whatever that definition
Sorry,
is.
wait, Mike Tenney just wrote, give me all your money.
Shut up, Mike.
All right, sorry, go on. Oh, and then he said for the kingdom.
Our Christians called retirement. What do we mean by retirement?
Yeah,
It really depends on what we mean by that.
So we can say two things. First, retirement means leaving the job that you work in because you no longer want to work there. Hold on. What is it? Yeah, I mean, retirement for some people means I'm going to leave the specific duty that I've been called to my life and do another duty or good that I truly want to do in service of God.
Yeah.
That would be one way of looking at it. Another way is retirement is college 2.0, where I have free funds. I have the money, the leisure, the time to do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do. I'm skipping class.
Right. It's kind of like all other parts of our life. Right now, in our present life, we tend to compartmentalize. Like, God, you can be in here and here and here, but not in my free time and not in my blow money because those are mine. And so the question is,
your blow money? Like
money
your
for
cocaine money?
No money to blow on whatever.
Money. Anyway.
So
Don't do drugs, kids.
I mean, some people out there seem to think of retirement in that way. That I'm giving God this part of my life. I'll be really intentional. I'll work hard, but then at some point, it's for me now. Now I get to relax and enjoy.
Yeah,
and
I put in my dues.
And it seems like that could be taken too far because you're not done yet. You're not a saint yet. Like you
got work to do.
Of our death. Like we are on the way. We're status fiatoris.
It's a confusion about what the ideal existence is to strive for here on earth, right? Like we want, it gets back to the comfort conversation, right? Like we want earth to feel like heaven,
right?
And it's not gonna. And if that's our goal and that's what we're working towards, then we're all screwed up. That's not how it's supposed to be. Heaven is heaven. And we are mission oriented here. We are trying to build the kingdom, bring people to Jesus. That's our goal. Like I don't ever want to be in a position where I worked so hard that I'm like, you know what? I am done bringing people to Jesus. I am just going to relax on a beach, have some pina coladas. If I might go to a beach and have pina coladas and talk to people about Jesus. That's the way to do it. That's a retirement worth talking about.
So what's the question here? Is it bad to save for retirement? It doesn't sound like it's a bad thing necessarily, as long as you're doing it in the sense of like, I'm following the Lord's will. I'm going to do what he wants me to. I mean, a lot of the people that I know they retire because they want to spend more time with their family, their kids, and all those are good things.
Yeah, totally.
But you need to save up money to ensure that you can actually do that. You can't stop working and then just expect to live off of Social Security.
Right.
Like you need to save money for that.
Not our generation.
Well, yeah, that's another question whether that's going to be around. But.
Yeah, so certainly that just as we were talking about earlier, that kind of prudential, planning ahead, being concrete about it. Like this is a reasonable lifestyle for me to want to live, not to retire and live fat cat, but to retire and live well. Well, how do I prepare for that? I think one piece of this that we're not going to be able to dig into much tonight, which is just that an unfortunate piece of this is that we really are in a place in our society where we look to our money and our financial systems to be the only way that we organize this, rather than seeing family relationships as the way we plan this, the way that we organize this. Teresa and I, we've got her dad had surgery, and my parents have a house near us, and they very generously allowed him to stay there to recover. And Teresa's making the meals a day, and we want that. Like that's been our vision since we got married, that we want our parents, when they're not out there working anymore, we want to be close to them. We want them close to the kids. And so I think thinking really intentionally about what is the reasonable lifestyle for a Christian who's retired, and what should that time really be about, and how do we prepare for that, both monetarily, but also in terms of relationships, in terms of what the conversations we're having with our kids and with our parents, what we're building towards there.
Amen.
It's so hard though, because like, how do you plan with inflation and you almost, well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's almost, to me, there's a zero sum choice here. It's like, do we just completely trust and we become more family oriented, and we like do not have this expectation, but like in our culture, it's like someone gets old, we put them in a nursing home, versus in some other cultures, it's like, no, like the grandparents, they come and they live with you. And that's a whole cultural shift, the paradigm shift that needs to happen, I feel like.
Yeah, and we use money in our culture now, oftentimes where love does not exist. I'm going to have someone come and take care of me and feed me and wipe my butt and pay the money because I have no children who will do that for me.
Because I don't want to, or because I don't want to be a burden.
Or I don't want to be a burden to my family, all that
really
stuff.
Problematic.
Yeah, but I do think there's like, we can foresee some and you can know some. And I do think if you say, hey, I, reasonably can expect to live for this long and I may need this much, and you define that dollar amount and you're not saving excessively and indefinitely, is there room there?
I mean, I think that's a model for the rest of the decisions you make in your life, right? Because you see a task ahead of you, you plan accordingly, but you don't plan excessively. We were talking about that earlier too. Like you don't never actually do the good thing that God's calling you to do, because you can always prepare more and more. No, you prepare the reasonable amount for the task, but then you also step forward in faith and say, Lord, if this wasn't enough preparation, well, you got to take care of me there. Like I can only see that so many steps ahead, but then I have to also recognize there's providence involved here.
And now we're 1 minute over on that topic, so I'm going to put a stop there.
In a neat little town they called Belfast, apprentice to trade I was bound. Nick, you gotta sing this with me.
I'm trying.
And many an hour of sweet happiness I spent in that neat little town, till bad misfortune came o'er me, that caused me to stray from the land. Far away from me friends and relations, to follow the black velvet band. Her eyes, they shone like diamonds, you'd think she was queen of the land. And her hair hung over her shoulders, tied up with a black velvet band. To our wonderful patrons, here is to you, to your health.
Cheers.
Blessings of the patrons. You don't have anything?
I know. I need to fix that.
I'm
about to fix that.
The problem here, we're drinking water. It's all we could afford.
Listen,
because of our patron level. For as little as $100 a month.
Oh my gosh.
You could get us Green Label Prime Shelf alcohol.
So check out themenshow.com and please join our patron community. The League of Ordinary Gentlemen and Ladies are invited too.